guys, my name is Luke Wayland. I just noticed with it's more common probably, the 10-point plan, talk about a regional solution. We've already got a regional solution. We've got Nauru, New Guinea, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand being the umbrella to stop anyone coming here. I mean, I would like a solution. I think the 5-point plan's got a better one. Because it does have we need to take the initiative. We need to show, instead of being the example of how to be nasty, we need to be the example of how to be nice and how it's in our best interest long term. Like, Conservative leader in Germany is doing. That's in the long-term interest of Germany to accept people. It's a long-term interest in Australia to accept people, and not just as a temporary thing. It's awful. It seems awful that if you don't need to come here, we welcome you. If you do need to come here, we treat you like as criminal.
I can't disagree with any of that. Certainly, the so-called regional solution we've got at the moment is the wrong one. Nauru and Manus need to be shut. I think the 5-point and 10-point plans are not opposed to each other; they're complementary. And certainly the point number 4 there about safe and just passage of asylum seekers to Australia is what I think a regional solution, a regional processing, assessing system would actually deliver. Because we don't want people dying at sea taking risks they don't have to if you've got a sensible way of people coming here, so we accept more people. And I think that one of the key things in this is to massively increase our intake. Under Robert Menzies, that well-known pinko crypto socialist, in the early 50s, he took in 87,000 people in 1 year in the early 50s. Malcolm Fraser took in 36,000 people in 1 year. We've now got 13,750. It's got to be at least 30,000. And you bring people safely, but you've also got to have provisions for people who may arrive by boat because we live on an island. But I take your point. The notion of we're a nation that punishes and that doesn't welcome people is counter to our history. Because unless you're an Aboriginal person, you or your people have come from somewhere else. We're all in that boat. But thank you for the question.
My name is Kieran Howard. I'm on the Politics and Pub Management Committee. Okay. We have politicians extolling, on the one hand, the virtues of free trade agreements allowing for the free circulation and movement of capital, commodities, goods and services, yet on the other hand are happy to impose draconian, cruel border restrictions on the free movements of people. How do you explain this? And given our nation's irrational, atavistic fear of refugees, in particular boat people, who, as you say, may well represent in a perverse way Australia's projected collective guilt over our treatment of the first Australians, the Aboriginal peoples, by European settlers who themselves arrived by boat, how are we as a nation going to cope with a world where, due to human-induced climate change, large migrations of people are expected to be the norm? And is it true that Australia is the only developed country to spend billions of taxpayers' dollars with the sole objective of making desperate people as miserable as possible?
Well, look, the whole point of this, the whole hypocrisy of the whole thing of being against the free movement of people. It's okay to bring them on temporary employment and on wages that are totally inferior to Australian wages. No one complains about that. But this is about playing with xenophobia for political purposes. It's playing with fear, because when people are afraid, they're much easier to rule and to prevent critical thinking. So I think that's what that's about. It's straight hypocrisy. In terms of, what was your second point, sorry? The climate change.
The climate change and our atavistic fear. I really like the point that you made, our atavistic fear of boat people, and that the historical link between European settlers, invaders, and the treatment of the first Australians. It's almost like a projected collective guilt that we attribute to the current boat arrival. We won't
Yes.
resolve issues with our treatment of the first Australians, and even the link now between our treatment of the refugees in the Pacific gulags and our treatment of Aboriginal people in the juvenile justice system.
Yes,
the links that you were saying, I think are quite
the people have made that link.
And also the human-induced climate change. It's expected that mass migrations will be the new norm. It's already happening now,
Yes.
increasingly so. So Australia is committed to dealing to remediation of climate change, but one aspect of that will be the huge migrations that are expected due to climate change.
Well, I mean, Australia's record in the face of climate change has been abysmal, and that they should, that collectively we would recognise the needs of people who are fleeing climate change issues. At the moment, don't look good.
No.
And also the sort of International Refugee Convention doesn't recognise climate change or economic need for that matter. I mean, they talk about economic refugees, but of course, you know, the Irish fleeing the potato famine were
Exactly.
economic refugees,
Yeah.
many of them who landed up here.
Even the category distinction between political and economic.
Yes, yes.
How do you define it or separate
That's
the
right,
two?
that's right. And the question of the link and with guilt, I think I'm wondering if perhaps it's a bit more sort of complicated. It's more about the other and that kind of sense of us and them and the insecurity of being the sea, but also that sense that we did in fact conquer this land. And it's more that everything's the other and we've got to repress the other in order to survive ourselves. It's a very atavistic, grim thing.
Jeff Lee. My Dorothy Dixer, if it's that, is related to the statements by the PNG government today, saying it's been 3 months since the court decision there, declaring that Manus Island is illegal, should be shut down, and a similar statement by a politician in Nauru in the last 24 hours saying, when's Australia going to take back people from Nauru? That's my question to Bill. My question to Vivian and Bill is, it was less than a month ago when there was a major expose in the ABC TV of the corruption in our Department of Immigration, where people are illegally obtaining visas and citizenship rights in this country as a result of paying off migration agents, and the corruption is all the way through the system, and I believe it has been for decades, from comments made by a former member of the Refugee Review Tribunal to me way back in the 1990s. When is this public service corruption going to be weeded out? And surely the wind would be taken out of the Hansonite sails if the corruption involving 457 visas, where very wealthy Chinese students can get extended visas and permanent residence as a result of doing a fake hairdressing saloon course at some imaginary college. I'm saying we're picking on the wrong people. We're picking on the people that are facing death if they go home to their country, whereas the new class of billionaires, if you've got $1 million in your pocket, you can come to this country as a business migrant. If you know how to rip off the system, you can come under a 457 visa. If you know how to work the immigration scam through dodgy immigration officers, the Department of Immigration will assist you. Surely the heat should be turned up in those areas, and that's why I support a national ICAC into corruption in Australia at a federal level, let alone a state level. Thank you.
The first question, you highlight a pretty important issue that's often forgotten, and that is the impact that these policies have had upon countries like Nauru and Manus Island, PNG. There's 11,000 people live in Nauru, and at various stages we've had 2,000 people deposited there. Now that would be the equivalent in Australia, where we've got 24 million people, would be the equivalent to something like the population of Brisbane or Queensland being visited upon a population that has had, no history of this level of multiculturalism or integration. So it was set up to fail, and that's what we're seeing. So I think and having been to Nauru, not under this present manifestation, we're not able to go, but having been there before, it is one of the poorest places now in the Pacific. It needs international assistance. It doesn't need to have our moral, political and legal obligations to refugees outsourced to them. So I think I thank you for mentioning that, because often it gets forgotten. Certainly in PNG they're saying this morning that these people should come back to Australia, who deposited them there. Clearly there is a window in the first 12 months of a newly elected government to do something like that. After that we're back into the election cycle. With how long this government lasts, who knows? But it seems to us that it's fairly clear that there is an obligation for Australia, because this stuff simply isn't sustainable on 3 levels. It's not sustainable legally. PNG High Court showed that. It's not sustainable morally, for obvious reasons. And ultimately it's not sustainable either economically. So it's going to have to change, and the result is those people have to come here. In terms of the corruption in the public service, I think that's an issue that needs to be continually raised. There are lots and lots of good people in the public service too, of course. But a national ICAC may be one of the ways of doing that.
Yes, in terms of the relationship with Nauru and PNG, I mean, unfortunately, Australia's record around the Pacific is horrendous as a sort of small colonial power. In relation to Bougainville, in relation to East Timor, the whole record is miserable, and it's just part of the same pattern. Australia's the ugly Australian stamping around, asserting its own interests with no respect at all, just as it has no respect at all for Indigenous Australians when it develops and implements policies like the intervention. So I think that's really important. The question of corruption, it's not just wealthy Chinese, it's more to do with the corruption itself, and a national ICAC I think is really, really important. And it's the corruption within the department, and it's the whole business of just if you think of it, as I was mentioning before, the question of the workers being brought in and working at much lower wages. These are the poor who are being abused, and students who are being abused. So abuse goes at many levels. I'd hate to see another sort of xenophobic thing around Chinese. We speak always about Chinese buying land and Chinese doing this and Chinese doing that, and I think it's a bit problematic.
Good evening, thank you for your talk. I'm Geoffrey Balchi, and my first is a comment that I actually haven't met any Australian races. I've only met racial opportunists, people who play on fears of others. My second is a question, why can't we simply treat both people the same way we treat people who come in by plane? That's the second. But the third is, Australia still has a lot of economic needs to fulfill. We have floods in the north, droughts in the south. We could have built a canal to decongest the flood and irrigate the south, and bolster agriculture in both areas. We could move out of CSG and fossil fuels and develop our indigenous sustainable energy resources. Wind, sun, coconut in the north. And we could build, the problem why we can't build a high-speed railway in the same way Europe and China does is we don't have enough people to build it and to ride them. Why can't we mobilize the people who want to come to Australia to help build these things that our country actually needs? Thank you.
Yes, well, I mean, well said. The whole thing's so deeply irrational and against our rational interests as a nation, and therefore we have to look at other reasons why this is happening. I mean, the whole question of, why do we continue to subsidise fossil fuels, for example? you know, huge sums of money. There's just so much stuff that's deeply irrational, but it is because of inequality and people, the capitalist class maintaining its privilege. That's ultimately what it's all about.
In any given year, only 13,750 refugees coming in, which can be an issue, is up to 180,000, and under John Howe up to 300,000 people came in here under the migration program. And obviously it's necessary and it's needed, and it's something that Australians accept. Our issue is what's the problem with the people who come seeking protection as refugees. And they need to come in under their own terms, not just what they can economically do for us. But clearly what they do when they get here, if all the statistics indicate that when people seeking protection get here, their engagement in the economy is fantastic. They bring a demand for goods and services, which expands the economy. But it's the issue of that 13,750 becomes a focus, but the 180 to 300,000, that's all right. So I think it's about the numbers of people we need here. It's a question of why do we do this to refugees?
Hello, my name's Beverly. I was listening to the radio, ABC radio, on the way here tonight. How would you explain the fact that we now have 4 Pauline Hanson senators in Australia, and I heard one of those senators tonight absolutely denying that there is such a thing as climate change. It's an absolute lie, according to this person. And the racism that is expressed by that particular group of people was appalling as well. So, what are we doing? How are we going to overcome this sort of transition?
Thank you for a really easy question at the end of the year. The anguish, the hurt, the pain, the cry for something that I feel hurt and damaged, that Hanson first brought to the Australian discourse was probably, coming from a place of actual deep concern. But what the problem then is, what are you then, I'm worried about the kids, I'm worried about their employment, I'm worried about the fact that all the things that people are worried about, the angry stuff. And years ago, Sir Vincent de Paul and ACOS did a research program and looked at when people have those fears and anxieties, it's very easy for policymakers and others to find someone to blame rather than to deal with the causes of that. And I think the Hanson agenda, which you see reflected in the disaffected people following Donald Trump around the United States, we see it in the Brexit stuff in the United Kingdom. We see it in the rise of Marine Le Pen and the National Front in France. We've seen it in Holland and we've seen it in Belgium. It's in the Western world at the moment. Now, it's when people confront a fear or they're told, aha! There was the episode before the last election when the now defeated member for Lindsay went on 4 corners and said the reason we don't like asylum seekers so much in Australia in this part of the world is because our traffic is so bad. So I rang the office and I said, mate, how many asylum seekers have we got in Lindsay at the moment? He rang back and said 23. I said, how many got access to a car? He said, give me an hour. Couldn't find anybody. So that's about scapegoating, because there's a real fear that people have in terms of unemployment, in terms of price of housing, the cost of petrol, the price of living. It's far easier to say, well, who's to blame? Asylum seekers from Afghanistan, than actually deal with some of the causal issues that we've been touched on. But I also think it is fundamentally important that we just don't abuse and throw rocks at those people, because that feeds the beast. Because it says we're disaffected, we're not listened to, and if we then fall into that trap, we feed that, and they can go, see, a bit like what's happening with Donald Trump, he can say completely outrageous things, and when people are holding to account, they go, see. So we have to engage with this, and I did hear that press conference from that new senator, and that's going to be a very difficult engagement. But the point here is that we are not to victimise and demonise those people. We have to find a way to enter into that discourse and present the facts in a way that they can be heard. Because, I mean, Christos Sulkis, the writer from Melbourne who wrote The Slap, he said there's a thing in Australia at the moment, there's a willed ignorance abroad. You know, listen to Alan Jones, the climate change stuff. You know, I do a lot of work in Kiribati and Tuvalu, right? Someone who says that's never been there, they've never been there. Like you can be in Tuvalu in a high tide, and which is 150 metres away, and you can see springs popping up because the water comes under the land and comes up through the ground. Right? This is a reality. So rather than condemn people for their ignorance, we need to find a way to engage and bring those people with us, to say the solutions to the problems and the fears you feel are not in demonising others, but the solution is in embracing the changes that will bring the outcomes you ultimately seek if you unpack it. To me, hard, but there's no other answer.